right, good afternoon. My name is Olivia Hodge, and I am an undergraduate student at Purdue University. I am a junior in marketing, and today I'm going to be presenting on behalf of Cliff Fisher and Lydia Barber. So today I'm going to be discussing the social media company TikTok and their ever-growing presence as a social media platform. And I'm also going to touch on UK data privacy laws, US data privacy laws, and how TikTok has chosen to interact with both of those. So to begin, I'd like to start by looking at the evolution of the digital age we're living in. Then I'll do a breakdown analysis of UK law, US law, and then how companies can be ensured that they're complying with both. So, as I'm sure you're all well aware, we are living in the digital age. We have a lot of us on Zoom right now, which is fantastic for industries and developing companies. But to offset that, it is also resulting in children having access to the internet at ages that are younger and younger. There's a new term now called iPad kids. I don't know if you've heard of it, but this term is for children as young as 2 years old who have access to the internet. And I'm not here to give a lecture on parenting. I'm not here to say whether or not I agree that children should have access that early. But what I do want to bring up is the children who say maybe they've been left alone in a room with an iPad that's unlocked. Whoopsie, go online, accidentally hit something. I want to address companies in the way they set up their data privacy policies so that children do not have to treat the internet like a minefield, and that it can be a safe place for them to learn and grow using the technology that society has been able to develop. In addition to this, there is a new currency. I call it a new currency. I wouldn't say that's what everyone calls it. Data brokerage. A consumer's personal data is like money to a company. They buy, sell, trade it. And they do this under the umbrella of creating a personalized experience for their users. Now, with this personalized experience, that means you're sharing behavioral and demographic data, say your gender, sex, political affiliation, and even down to some specifics. They can be able to track your mood depending on what you access on certain days. And me personally, I find that to be a bit invasive, and I don't want that for the children of this world. So with data brokering, companies are able to create, like I said, personalized experiences, targeted advertisements. And this is so profitable to them because a study shows that if users are working with a personalized experience or they come across a targeted ad, they're 91% more likely to purchase said product because, again, it's tailored to them. All right. So moving on, I would like to address the of the issue. So TikTok itself was previously known as Musical.ly, owned by the same company, ByteDance, a Chinese company. And back in 2019, they were sued $5.7 million by the US FTC for mishandling its child user data. Then in 2020, it was found that more than a third of TikTok users are under the age of 14. This just the audience that they have on the app and how important it is that their data privacy regulations are up to par. Then in 2022, TikTok is accused by the ICO, the UK ICO, of inappropriately collecting children's data. And then just this year, they did go through with the lawsuit, and they were fined 12.7 million euros for the lack of parental consent and clarity within their privacy policies. All right, now taking a look at the UK GDPR. So how does this all fit together? So the UK GDPR was established by the Data Protection Act of 2018. Now, 2018, that is pre-Brexit. This was still when Britain was a part of the EU. Since then, the UK GDPR and the Data Protection Act have been tailored to adapt to their current status. And the GDPR of the EU, and now the UK's as well, are known as the gold standard for data protection. It is an overlying level that defines data processor and controller responsibilities, and it sets up 7 principles that companies need to adhere to when collecting consumer data. These principles are lawfulness of processing, limitations of purpose, data minimization, accuracy, storage limitations, integrity, and confidentiality, all with the overarching purpose of keeping companies accountable in the way they treat consumer data. And within the UK GDPR, there is an explicit command to take care of children's data with extra care. Now, this is where the Children's Code comes in. This is the extra care that the UK GDPR is talking about. So once again, it was established through the DPA 2018 and provides specific guidelines for companies to adhere to. The Children's Code applies to online service providers and organizations that collect data through apps, websites, and even just online phone games. So what the Children's Code asks of companies and requires of companies is that they take a risk-based approach. So when they're starting their online service, they have children's safety in mind from the start. And how might companies do that? That seems pretty challenging considering all the regulation they have to abide by. This is where data protection impact assessments come into play. So I'm going to refer to these as DPIAs for the sake of brevity. DPIAs act as a checklist for companies so they can see where do they have high risk issues with data, where do they need to mitigate keeping that consumer data safe. And so if companies start developing their service with this in mind, they already have solid footing for the rest of their procedures. And I would also like to say the Children's Code does not apply strictly to children's content. It applies to any website that a child could gain access to. All right, moving on now to US data protection laws. So US data protection laws are very different from the UK's. The UK covers three main components, which is companies, government, and intelligence agencies. The US focuses on one of these aspects, and that is government. Now, that's on a federal level. They want to make sure that the US government isn't mistreating their citizens' data. And while I do appreciate that, it is now up to the states to figure out, okay, how are we going to deal with companies? Now, there are some things put in place by the US that help assist states in coming up with ways to combat people misusing their consumer data. And this was from the Privacy Act of 1974. That's what really establishes keeping consumer data safe. And it was the Federal Trade Commission Act of 1914 that really targets companies in the manner in which they do not deceive their customers via deception or misrepresentation. So again, there are things in place to keep companies accountable, but they are not specific enough for consumer data protections. So the US has something similar to the Children's Code, and that is COPPA. COPPA is the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, which was also built off the FCTA. And what this requires is, again, similar to the Children's Code. It requires full transparency within data processing policies. So if I'm on a website and it says, oh, accept cookies, don't accept cookies, here's our privacy policy, the language needs to be clear enough that a parent can read through it, understand what's being collected or shared, and they don't have to be a rocket scientist. They can read through it and say, okay, I understand this, I say yes or no. So that is what COPPA requires of websites. And another focus of COPPA is that they want parents to have consent over their children's data. They don't want companies to be willy-nilly with it and just get to decide for parents how they want to treat that data. All right, now we have the California Consumer Privacy Act of 2018. Now, this is something that is personally exciting to me because this was the first state that took action in creating further data protection policy. And the legislation they passed is very similar to the UK GDPR. They said, hey, we don't like what you're doing, or they didn't say, hey, we don't like what you're doing. No one was doing anything. So they decided that they wanted to give consumers more control over data protection, and this allowed for opt-out buttons on any website in California, or if it's being hosted in California, you have to provide your consumers with an opt-out button so their data is not collected. You give California consumers the right to delete cached information that's already been collected. And California residents also have the right to know about the information collected. And again, this is listed in all the privacy policies, listed in all the privacy policies of websites that are hosted out of California. And with this policy has brought nationwide influence. Several states are now following suit in developing their own consumer data protection legislation on their own. One state, Montana, they're banning TikTok as of January 1st. And I know a lot of states, this entire issue with TikTok has brought a lot of data protection issues into people's minds that had not been thought about previously. All right, so now focusing back on TikTok, just a few issues that they've had over the years. So specifically when it comes to the UK, they violated the UK GDPR by failing to obtain parental consent. They violated the Children's Code specifically. And they also failed to do enough to verify their consumers' ages. So the ICO commissioner, John Edwards, said 1 million children under the age of 13 were inappropriately granted access to the app, meaning data may have been used to track and profile them and deliver harmful content to them. Now, this is an area which TikTok failed in massively, and again, they were just fined the 5.7 million euros because of it. And in addition, the ways they've violated US policy, so failure to post a privacy policy on its site to begin with, and there was also a failure to provide direct, clear, and transparent information to parents. Some things that TikTok did do right. You see, TikTok had two different policies, again, because the US and the UK are so different. The UK was provided with a very specific privacy policy in an attempt to comply with the UK GDPR. However, while this was more specific, some of the phrasing they used, they said, oh, we don't share consumer information. In the next sentence, they say, oh, but we do distribute it within our own third parties. And they don't define those third parties. So again, that vagueness, that ambiguity, that doesn't fly. With the US's privacy policy that they provided, it's much less specific, much broader language, ambiguity everywhere. And they do not have the UK GDPR requirement to define what legitimate interests are in the ways that they are going to use consumer data. Yep. All right, so next, how can we ensure compliance? Companies, I know, they want to be successful. They don't want to trip over legal issues like this. So starting with the UK, I would recommend to embrace the Children's Code. Don't view it as a hindrance, view it as a tool. The ICO provides such practical steps to prevent violating these issues that work with them, fill out the DPIAs to assess where your company is at, get feedback from the ICO on how you can improve. And this will set your company up with, as I said earlier, solid legal footing to continue on. And looking at the US now, similar to the ICO, consult with the FTC. We have it there to work with. Again, don't view it as a hindrance. Yes, it's regulation. Yes, working with the government takes time, but it is worth it in order to protect children's data online. And while UK policy requires DPIA, those assessments, the US does not have that. They have something different that are self-regulated. So you yourself can submit something similar to a DPIA that is a self-regulatory check-in, get that approved by the FTC. If it's not approved by the FTC, they will give you feedback on that. And while you're receiving feedback on that, they offer a safe harbor program. So you are liability free for 180 days while they figure that out with you. And then just some concluding thoughts. I believe that US data laws need to be strengthened. But again, that is so much easier said than done. Implementing policies around 50 states, that's going to take a while. California, it took them a few years. It takes a while. So while I would like for that to happen overnight, it's not going to. But what I was hoping with this paper is that it would just advocate for the issue at hand and really get the conversation going around how we need to protect children's data in the future. And again, California was able to adopt a policy similar to the UK GDPR. The US cannot do that on a federal level due to regional nuances. So again, it's something that's going to take time, conversation, but it is a conversation that needs to happen due to the ethical imperative. So, thank you.